dehydration treatment. So in our last video, we talked about what causes dehydration. In this one, we're going to be talking more about dehydration treatment. With me, I have my wife, licensed massage therapist, Irene Severson, and then our special guest, Dr. Jamie Bohlman, and we're going to be just having a dialogue on understanding dehydration treatment. So before we understand the dynamics of how to move forward in that way, first we would have to understand how to identify dehydration. Dr. Bohlman, how would you recommend doing that?
Well, I'm actually a pediatrician, and so in my previous experience, either in the office or in the hospital, kids come in or people come in, and when they're dehydrated, they have certain exam findings that we might see. Miss Irene, you had kind of alluded to one from the last segment where, in massage therapy, if someone's dehydrated, their skin will be kind of tough. We call that skin turgor. And so that, that might tint a little bit. So if you notice, like when I press on my skin, it should have a nice bounce back feeling. But if you're dehydrated, it might actually stay like that for a little bit. And that's not a good sign. For kids, sometimes, babies, they might have a soft spot. We call that a fontanelle. If they're, decreased, for dehydration, you might feel that to be sunken a little bit. You might notice that if they're crying, there's no tears, their mouths might be, dry, that kind of stuff. If you're at home, if you're noticing you're not urinating, a lot, like at least once every 4 hours or so, 3 to 4 hours, you're dehydrated. Those kind of things.
Okay. Thank you for that. Irene, I know you already, did the skin test part earlier and whatnot, but do you have any other ideas on how to identify dehydration treatment? Or how to identify dehydration signs or signals?
Brain fog is another one.
Mm.
Of just taking in, when you wake up in the morning, you've been 8 hours without water, you're going to be dehydrated. And so be aware of that. One of the first things you should do is drink water in the morning. And it helps rejuvenate from the dehydration and also prepares your body to start functioning and to digest the morning meal. So drinking that water first thing in the morning is extremely important.
So thank you for that. We started out with identifying dehydration, which is not bad. And then we moved into a treatment, which is good. I mean, we all, I myself, in the morning, I drink a 1 quart container of water every morning. And that helps to flush that out and whatnot. Dr. Jamie, what other recommendations would you have as it relates to treatment?
Well, I mean, definitely the best treatment is prevention. And so the best thing is to stay hydrated. But if you find that you are dehydrated, then you want to, to start replenishing yourself with, plenty of fluids, water mostly. And so if you are very, very dehydrated, you might need just a little bit of salt in there. So like, broth might be okay. That way it gives you some of the minerals as well, because you don't want to, over toxicate yourself with the water. That can actually happen.
Have a question there on that salt. Are you talking about table salt? Are you talking some kind of special salt, or does it matter what kind of salt?
The main salt in our body is sodium, so just a little bit of that, but just as long as you're eating a little bit of food, but mostly water. You don't need a lot of salt, really. But that's where sometimes, the commercial products like Pedialyte, even Gatorade, they really, focus on that. But the only problem with the Gatorade, all the commercial products, is there's a lot of sugar in there. We don't need that much sugar. Mm-hmm. But the minerals are important. So that is one thing to, be very careful of, is that if you want to rehydrate yourself, drink plenty of water, but you also need a little bit of salt in there as well.
So, back in 2015 when I was taking a 1,600-mile bike ride, I used what was called Himalaya sea salt.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If you were to have the option between table salt, just regular, and Himalaya sea salt, which would you recommend?
We always use more of the sea salts.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get a few extra minerals in there. Now, if you have high blood pressure, salt is salt. And so, so there's not a lot of difference, but there is some extra benefits to the Himalayan salt, yes.
Okay. And this is true for the grown person as
Mm-hmm.
well as the just starting out? I mean, the infant, the baby?
Yes. Now, for infants, it's very, very important because when you do hydrate them, when they're less than 6 months old, their bodies can't regulate the water very well. So don't ever give just plain water to an infant. You always want, if you want to rehydrate them, give them, a little, probably I would say less than 2 ounces of just straight plain water. In that particular instance, and I would recommend Pedialyte if you need to rehydrate them. But breast milk, if you do give formula, it would be okay. But breast milk is always best.
So I got a question there as it relates to dehydration treatment and breast milk.
Mm-hmm.
Does it matter? I'm just thinking the female that is doing that breastfeeding at the process, if she has not been hydrating herself, does that breast milk end up being more of a complication?
They will not get enough of their liquids, from your breast milk. Also, if you're a breastfeeding mom and you have not been hydrated yourself, you will have lots of problems as well. Mastitis, different lumps, that kind of, clog up your ducts of your lactation, ducts and stuff.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to come back over here to Irene. You mentioned earlier a skin test to see if a person is hydrated. How do you do that?
Well, you just push down and you look and you see, hey, it bounced back. If you push down and it stays concave, there's a problem.
Okay. Do you have anything to add to that test? As far as just that test specifically?
If you have issues with kidney or heart, sometimes you can push down on, especially like your legs, because if you don't have good circulation, it kind of pulls down there. So if you push that down and then it kind of stays, that can mean something different. But yes, for the most part, your skin should bounce back.
Okay. All right. Is there any other types of treatment to understand if a person is dehydrated? I'll open it up to the floor, either way.
Well, coming from the medical side, of course, we can always get labs and stuff. And, if your blood is very concentrated, you'll see all your different labs, your white blood cells, your red blood cells, your sodium, all the different minerals will go sky high. And your kidneys will start to, once you actually start to get dehydrated, your kidneys will start to dysfunction. So water is very, very important.
So I know we talked a little bit about this in the last video, but as it relates to dehydration treatment, is there, how do I know if I'm heading towards being dehydrated? Because we have mentioned the idea that, well, if you find out, what's an early sign other than skin test, and how do I know that I'm taking that path?
If you haven't urinated, like Miss Irene said, you start to kind of feel like foggy, like I can't remember, what happened. Or else if you start feeling thirsty. Now, by that time, when you start feeling thirsty, that's already kind of too late. But that's the body's, main, defense mechanism to get us to start drinking water is that we start feeling thirst.
So, what I think I just heard you say is, if I get to the point of, where you're feeling really, I've been there before, where you're feeling really thirsty and I just really need a drink. By that time, you're already heading towards dehydration.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Or have you actually you're far more than heading towards dehydration?
You're definitely in dehydration.
You're in dehydration. Uh-huh. Okay. So, we talked about the ounces and whatnot that last time. is there a frequency that we should do within water, drinking water? Irene, do you have an answer for that?
How often you should drink some water?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, set out a pattern for yourself of, like, we drink 1 quart of water in the morning before we have breakfast. Okay, I need another 1.5 quarts throughout the day. So I set out a concept and get my brain thinking. But if I don't have that 1 quart of water, I can go all day and not even think of water because I didn't prime the pump up here. If I prime the pump up here, oh, I need some water. Oh, I need some water. And it's an easy trigger to go throughout the day and, oh, have I drinking any water before I eat lunch? Have I drinking any water before the evening comes? So I try to space it out because I know, okay, I weigh X, half that weight in ounces for water. That's another way of measuring how much water a person needs. Mm-hmm. So it's spacing it out. It's being conscious of what you're doing and not saying, oh, I'll wait until my body says I'm thirsty.
All right. So as we close this particular one on dehydration treatment, are there any final thoughts? I'll go ahead and open the floor to you first.
The only, and this might be going into a different topic, but when you mentioned, drinking water before your meals, make sure you don't drink too close to your meals. So you want to do 30 minutes either before or after. You want to give yourself a chance to digest.
Excellent. Excellent.